usually more also on the optimistic side, but we also see it based on the data. With all these advancements, we see that the data makes more sense now compared to the last 2 years, and things are getting easier for marketers to digest when they try to measure their campaigns. So yes, like behind the scenes, there's like more moving parts and more questions to ask and validate. But at least at the bottom line, when you're trying to start a campaign, you want to check the results, I think the end user experience for the marketer and the advertiser are getting better for sure.
What is modern marketing measurement, and what does mobile attribution mean in 2025? Hello and welcome to Growth Masterminds, the podcast for growth marketers. My name is John Koetsier. We know what mobile attribution used to mean, IDFA, GAID. We know what marketing measurement used to look like, last click, maybe multi-touch attribution. So much of that is changing, right? There's privacy, there's ATT, there's SKAN network, there's ad attribution kit, there's Privacy Sandbox and Android, and there's still some uncertainty over the future of the third-party cookie. So everything's becoming different. Plus, we have so much new measurement tech on the network side. We've got big platforms doing modeling, sometimes sending more data to measurement platforms like Singular, but also removing some elements to retain privacy. Other ad networks doing their own modeling and probabilistic measurement. What's it all mean? Well, today we're going to do a deep dive into the data that is going into attribution on the network side and on the Singular side. We're going to look at modern attribution, things like Meta AEM, advanced aggregate measurement, advanced AEM. We're going to look at Google ads conversion modeling, Snap advanced conversion, even advanced SKAN, which they haven't released yet as we're actually talking about this, but they will shortly. We'll talk about TikTok, advanced SKAN. A lot of that stuff is happening on the network side. Some is the network side passing more data. All of it feeds into Singular's unified measurement. Question is, how should marketers think of all this, use it? To dive in, we have the perfect person, Singular CTO, Eran Friedman. Welcome back, Eran.
Yeah, thank you, John. Very excited to be here again.
It has been a while. I'm excited to have you back. I'm pretty sure you've been on Growth Masterminds like 3 or 4 times, maybe even more, but I think it's been like half a year. So I'm pumped. Eran's just back from a long trip to Korea and China. So he's like 8 hours off on his time zone. So we'll reach out virtually, slap him in the face if he gets a little tired, and see how it all works out. Eran, let's lay the foundation. We're seeing so many modeling products come out for each major platform, Meta, Google, TikTok, Snap. I don't think Apple has one, but other partners, AppLove and Moloco, probably have their own as well. I want to kind of just knock them down sort of one by one and just go into them and say, okay, what are they kind of doing there, and how's it work? Let's start with Meta, AEM and advanced AEM.
Right. So I think generally, Meta AEM has been around for a while, probably like a couple of years. And the whole kind of premise was their own solution for attributing conversions on iOS for their campaigns. For AEM, they've basically been relying on being able to show conversions for both opt-in users based on IDFA on iOS, and also opt-out users based on their own modeling, as they refer to. And that's been available in Meta's own dashboards. You could see like the number of installs attributed by Meta across their campaigns on iOS. I guess the limitations on Meta side historically has been that it's their own modeling that's not deduplicated with other networks. So if, for example, you would use, the AppLovins, Iron Source, Google, TikTok, and so forth, you could see Meta's attributed installs for AEM in Meta's dashboard, and you can see all the other attributions and also IDFA opt-ins in the MMP dashboards, but those won't be deduplicated. So if you try to sum it up together, it might be more than the total number of installs that you're getting, right? So that was Meta AEM. The recent news that was released around October, so about 6 months ago, was the new solution that Meta develops, partnering with Singular and other MPs, called Advanced AEM, which was really exciting for us as an MP and for all the advertisers out there, and basically opened up the option to have MMPs receive the modeled conversions that Meta is doing for their own attribution on iOS. So now, in addition to Meta showing their own kind of conversions in Meta's dashboard, the MPs are getting that information per user. So every time we send them an install, regardless if they're with an IDFA or without it on iOS, we can receive a Meta's modeled claim saying this user came from Meta, from a specific campaign, from a specific time stamp, just based on their real-time modeling of the attribution results. So then basically, us as an MMP, we get Meta's claims for opt-out users as well, and we're able to deduplicate it across all the different touch points and show basically back to the golden age of like before ATT, showing the granular, accurate, real-time reporting across all iOS users coming from Meta, which is really, really exciting for us.
Very, very cool. Cool. And we'll compare and contrast a lot of these as we get through them. Let's talk a little bit about Google. There's not a ton of information available about what Google does for ad conversion modeling, but we know that Google does it. What can you share? What do you know about what Google's doing there?
Right. So Google's solution is pretty similar to AAM. It has existed for a long while now. If you think about historically, Google, even before like the ATT days, Google always had the challenge of a lot of their inventories coming from mobile web, because Google is based on a lot of like search and search partners is coming from mobile web. So even before iOS 14 and like IDFA and privacy things, they always had the challenge of not being able to deterministically attribute between touch points from Google and the actual installs. So years back, before even ATT was live, they always relied on modeling to supplement the deterministic attributions on IDFA. So Google had the modeled conversions on Google's side. Now, similar to AAM, the limitations are the same. So it's shown in Google's UI, the AdWords kind of ad manager, but hasn't been accessible to the MMPs. This is one of kind of the well-known kind of limitations by Google. And, without getting too much into the details, I would expect that this might be actually solved pretty soon, like this year, because we definitely see that all the top self-attributed networks are shifting more towards providing that type of information for MMPs to be able to deduplicate with all the different networks and provide that accurate attribution info.
Which is a massive step, as you mentioned when you're talking about Meta, right? It's a massive, massive step. I mean, it's giving us more data to make an informed decision and say, yeah, that's actually what caused this. It also gives us more data to eventually come out potentially with a more sophisticated form of attribution, which isn't just, you saw, here's one, we saw five touches. Here's the one we're giving full credit to. And so that'll be interesting in the future.
Completely agree.
Let's talk about TikTok. So TikTok has done some interesting things. Advanced SKAN is one of the things that they've recently talked about and released, and giving MPs a bit more data. What is TikTok doing there and in the area of modeling?
Yeah, so TikTok has been relying more on like the integration partnerships with the MMPs for their entire attribution. Their focus has been really on the advanced SKAN integration, and I can provide the context there. So they had all kinds of like shifts in the integration, but let's say the classical integration with TikTok has been as a self-attributed network, which again has been relying on us sending them kind of all the installs coming in. And if the install would have an IDFA, then they'd be able to deterministically attribute that user and to TikTok's campaigns and provide us the answer. So it's like the classic SKAN integration. What's new in the advanced SKAN integration is we call it sort of like a hybrid integration. TikTok is basically doing both a SKAN integration and also sharing touch points directly from TikTok with us as an MMP. So sending us all the impressions and clicks or the engagements basically with TikTok campaigns. So that basically enables us to attribute to TikTok campaigns based on two types of attribution methodologies. One is deterministically based on IDFA, and that's based on TikTok's actually attribution on IDFA, and which we get all the details from them. But also complementing it with our own attribution that can be either deterministic or probabilistic, based on TikTok's touch points. So we actually have a dual integration of sorts of attributing in both ways. Everything happens in real time. And again, increasing the coverage. So we would be able to attribute both IDFA-based users and also opt-out users if our customers are using probabilistic attribution for TikTok's touch points. And enabling us, of course, to deduplicate all these results with the other networks as well. So we've already covered kind of Meta is AEM, and TikTok being able to now be deduplicated across all of the iOS users, which is fantastic for advertisers.
Super useful. And it's a great segue as we start talking about Snap as well, right? Snap has had advanced conversions. So they've had some modeling going on. They also have an advanced SAN product that they're about to release as we're talking here. We're about to release some information on it. I'll have to hold this recording until that is live. Talk about Snap.
Yes, exactly that. So Snap has been really advanced with the types of attribution they provide. So a bit similar to TikTok's advanced SAN integration. So using the same strategy in which we send all the insults to Snap, they're deterministically attribute them and provide the response. And also in the advanced SAN implementation, they are now starting to send us all the touch points, impressions and clicks. So we're able to probabilistically attribute Snap conversions. And also Snap has their own modeled conversions as well, similar to Google. And they're able to actually provide us the claims as well. So Snap is basically using all of the above, like deterministic attribution based on IDFA, the modeled conversions, and also sharing the touch points for us to probabilistically attribute them.
Which is also why when you were talking about Google, you're saying that you expect something similar at some level to arise from them also, because it's kind of the progression in the space.
Completely agree. Yeah, it's becoming kind of the new standard in a way of there's like a realization in the industry. If we're trying to kind of zoom out a bit, it's like the whole ATT saga that's happened like 4 years ago now. So and SKAN it's very useful, but it has its own limitations. So the big media partners realize that they have to come up with alternatives to that. And it's been interesting to see the different approaches between the partners, but definitely everyone is pushing towards providing more information for MMPs to provide better, more accurate, more granular, again, attribution across all these partners. So that's definitely a trend that we're seeing. It's across really all the SANs out there.
And we're focusing a little bit on iOS as we talk, because a lot of the privacy things have happened on iOS with ATT SKAN, the new AAK and all that stuff. Similar things are happening on the Android side, even though we have a GAID in most cases, correct?
That's correct. And I think the reason is there are actually several reasons there, but one of them, for example, is not all devices have a GAID actually supported. If you think about there are certain restrictions and limitations by Google in which sometimes GAID isn't accessible. If you think about COPA, kids-based apps, for example, they never had a GAID actually. Or there's the opt-out from the advanced settings of the device in which you can decide not to have a GAID. And of course, other considerations like the mobile web kind of type of traffic, and
which is getting more and more popular, web to app as well.
Exactly. And also, if you take into account the general, strategy that's maybe a bit more long-term by Android and Google to implement Privacy Sandbox, it basically means that the media partners also take that into account and want to make sure that their model solutions and kind of advanced solutions would also be able to support Android, both to expand those use cases, but also to prepare for a time in which GAID might not always be available.
It's super interesting, actually. I haven't run the data in a long time. I probably should, but the last time I remember running data on GAID availability, Some countries are very low. Like I think in Germany, 40% of people had turned it off, turned ad tracking off completely. And there's a couple other nations like that as well. So that is super interesting. Privacy Sandbox, we'll see if that ever arrives. I don't know. It seems like it's on the slow boat right now. I'm not sure
Yeah.
there's much else happening there. But if it does, we're ready. We're integrated. We're good to go. And as you say, the platforms are building technology. I got to talk about Apple a little bit, and because I have Apple search ads, and so it's very different. Obviously, it's iOS only for one, but also I don't think that they have really a modeling solution per se, because guess what? They have perfect visibility. you know, it's our device, it's our user, it's our ad network, and they're using our app to actually browse for which apps that they want to check. But they have done some interesting things around view through lately. Maybe chat a little bit about Apple and Apple search ads.
Yeah, for sure. So you're completely right that they don't really need the modeling part for the conversion. So all the attributions coming from Apple ads are completely deterministic across all type of users, whether they have an IDFA or not, because they don't really need an IDFA, like from their perspective. From how it works kind of technically, whenever you download an app from the App Store, historically, if the user would have clicked an ad driving the download, let's say when they're like searched for the app and then kind of click the ad leading to it, then the install itself in the device would include the attribution information from Apple. And by the way, it's using kind of a strategy that we can also talk about later on, relying on like what's referred as on-device measurement. In a sense, Apple is using their own on-device measurement because they own the operating system. But we can later on like talk about the additional like approaches or use cases for that strategy. But in any case, Apple Ads has always kept that information if the user clicked the ads and provided it through Apple's Ads API, directly accessible from the app. You can basically receive a token that stores that information. You can query Apple's servers from the backend and receive all the attribution information, knowing exactly where the user came from. The big news that happened just last month, basically, just a couple of weeks ago, was that Apple also added the support for view-through based attribution, meaning that if the user only saw the ad, but then downloaded the app, Apple is basically storing that information on the device, and then again, including it as an available information for the MAP to attribute back. Now, it's worth to remember or note that Apple's view-through attribution has already been, available in Apple's own dashboard. They're already attributing themselves based on view-through for a long while now. And the news are that now they're also making it accessible for the MAPs if the advertiser would like to check off a box and see the data. So there
With
will
a pretty
basically
long
match
window,
more.
if I recollect. It was a 30-day window for view through, if I'm not mistaken. Is that true?
So I think it depends a bit on like the placement of the ads. So there's some more nuances there, and like where exactly it's showing. It's not necessarily for search. It might be more like the main browse apps. There's like more documentation on Apple's side. So yes, there's the whole consideration of whether you want to rely on view-through attribution in kind of the attribution waterflow or not. But I always say that at least having the option is always like if the customer, for example, is only using Apple ads, for example, they might be actually interested in seeing the full attribution. So it would be closer, for example, to what Apple is showing in their own dashboard. So
Yeah,
also benefits.
exactly. App Store Connect and Apple's own ads measurement technology as well. Super interesting. Okay, cool. I also want to talk a little bit about other ad partners. So we've talked about the giants, right? By and large, we haven't talked about AppLove, and we haven't talked about ironSource, Moloco. Moloco surprisingly massive in our latest ROI index, for instance. They've been growing significantly over the past few years. And then, of course, there's a whole bunch of SDK partners and other ad networks and SDK networks and other partners and all that stuff. How do you see all that? I mean, there's definitely some modeling going on there and some other measurement. How's that all fit into the picture?
Yeah. So basically, if we try to categorize I don't know, at least in broad buckets, I would say there's, like you said, like the other advertising networks that are not considered self-attributing, I would say. Then these are typically, there's always nuances there to different types of channels and traffic that you can get from them. But typically, there's two standard ways to attribute them by the MMP. And they're all done by the MMP as kind of a standard. One is deterministically based on IDFA or GAID on Android. And then probabilistically based on, again, getting kind of the clicks and installs based on like additional properties of those traffic points, trying to probabilistically understand very high confidence that this user came from this touch point, whether impression or click. So that's been pretty standardized, I would say, for the last couple of years. And all are tying into the great kind of attribution waterfall, like tying it all together, basically, across all the different SKANs and non-SKANs and getting kind of to the bottom line results of who this user belongs to.
Yeah, makes sense. So there's a bunch of strategies going on here, right? Everybody is using all available technologies to try and understand what's happening. Everybody is modeling data because nothing's 100% certain anymore, even if we think maybe it never was, although there was a deterministic model on iOS and still is on Android. Many partners are sending more data to measurement partners. So ad networks sending more data to measurement partners. It's still privacy safe. It's maintained in a private way. Do you see any uniquenesses to any of them? Meta, Google, Snap, any of the other ad networks? Do you see anything that anybody's doing that is just totally different than anybody else?
I think it's always like the devil is in the details, but I will say I think you covered like the commonalities really well. Like there's everyone has realized that we need to advance from the attribution standpoint, and we see several types of strategies evolving. So some are doing their own modeling and sharing more of the results with the MMPs. Others are deciding to expose more data with the MMPs, again, in a privacy safe way, until providing more of those raw touchpoints and enabling the MMP to actually attribute them. There's like a pros and cons for each type of strategy, but we're basically seeing some are actually doing both, right? So there might be kind of an interesting, development through time in which maybe like all the channels would actually try to do both their own modeling and also showing more of the raw data with the MMPs to be able to attribute them. There's another category that I think that's kind of maybe a bit more unique and interesting to talk about, and I've mentioned it earlier, is around on-device measurement, like ODM, sometimes we call it as an acronym. And the idea here is when the publisher or the advertising network kind of has those engagements with the users, let's talk like in theory, they could store some information on the device so that the advertiser app would be able to put it and understand, okay, where the user came from. A bit like, on websites, when you kind of click an ad to a website and kind of you get like the URL parameters, right? Or the UTM source and campaign and so forth. So you know where the user came from. And that strategy, like historically, has been pretty nascent, like in mobile. Android basically provided something similar with the Google Play Refer method, and a lot of the Android attribution is actually powered by Google Play Refer historically. But then about a couple of years ago, Meta released their own Meta Refer mechanism on Android as well. So with a similar strategy, just a different implementation. Again, whenever you see an ad or click an ad on Android, they were basically storing that information on the device for the MMP to be able to retrieve it and attribute based on that. And we see that as an approach coming more and more, and trying to think about how can you use that, not just on Android, but also on iOS. Again, every operating system is different, but I think that can provide another view to the mix with its own like pros and cons. But I think it can definitely be interesting and increase like the accuracy and coverage across all these users and channels.
And you can see that increasing as well as you see more OEM app stores, right? You've got networks like Avow and Emobi that will operate app stores for OEMs like Samsung or Huawei or others, obviously all on Android right now. Not all, actually. There's some coming out on the iOS and the EU. And we'll see how those do. But as that happens, then you can see more different technologies, but also on-device measurement, kind of similar to the way Apple probably does it on the ASA and on iPhone, right? So you've got technology right embedded in the device, in the operating system, and can do interesting things there. Attribution is going to get interesting as we see more and more of those on iOS as well as Android. I guess the $64,000 question, the $1 million question, the $1 billion question, why not? Is how does Singular treat all this, right? There's these SAN attributions. There's more data from the SANs with advanced SAN type technologies. There's still IDFAs. There's obviously SKAN network, AAK on the iOS side. There's GAID and Google Refer and Meta Refer on the Android side. All that has to come together somehow in a singular dashboard. All that has to sort of build into what Singular's been calling unified measurement. It seems like life has gotten a lot more complex as an MMP over the last 5 years.
Yeah, I definitely hear you there. But it's part of our role as an MMP is to try to take all that complexity and, as always, try to simplify it for advertisers so it's easy enough for them to just get to the bottom line and make decisions. And I think we're using like several approaches. So I think first of all is with all these advancements around like the modeling and the attributions that are going out there, the first part of the system that we're continuously like iterating and adding more is to provide like this view based on user level attribution, whereas based on either probabilistically or deterministically, trying it the deepest granularity possible across all the different channels. And that view kind of like existed before the IDFA days. You could basically attribute based on kind of user level across all of these campaigns. It was definitely hurt a lot like throughout like those privacy changes. And we're seeing kind of a shift back just based on all the modeling advancements out there to the early days. Now we're basically seeing across almost all and very soon pretty much all top networks, all the user level based attributions directly in Singular. And that's great because it can provide, again, like real-time, accurate, extremely granular reporting based on last click or last view, basically attribution. So that's one part. But with that, because the world is a bit more complex than what it was like a few years ago, we're getting kind of new challenges. I can give an example. A lot of that modeling is also based on the network's own kind of modeling strategies. And part of the challenge is that each network has a different methodology for doing their modeling. It's not necessarily apples to apples when you're trying to compare Google's ads model conversions, for example, with Meta's conversions and Snap's kind of model conversions. So at least with the current advanced integrations and the AIM integrations, you can deduplicate them altogether using Singular and seeing kind of the last click across all of these. But it's still kind of an interesting strategy of, or like a question that we get from customers saying, okay, but how, how close are they as results? And maybe they're kind of like all modeling the same attributions, for example, or maybe there are differences between what Meta is reporting and the deduplicated number. And when the differences occur, how different are they? So it kind of brings up those more advanced questions, I would say, that maybe if you're just starting as a startup, you're setting up your first attribution, maybe you might wait trying to answer this question. Just start with, I just want basic reporting, seeing my ROI, and now you'll be able to get it, which is fantastic. But maybe as you scale, have more partners in the mix and you want to challenge more, like question more, like the results that you're seeing, then those questions become important. How do I see everything in a single view? How can I compare side by side the numbers reported by the network versus the number reported by Singular? How can I validate more of these numbers with other data sets? I'm curious to see what SKAN says about some of these numbers. What does the App Store says about some of these numbers? And I think it really connects with kind of our view or like our vision of seeing it all in a single place, seeing all the different data sets and what they report on these, and helping the customer drive deeper insights of how do these all connect together and what's kind of like the bottom line unified metric that you can rely on across all these different data sets.
So that's super interesting. If I boil that down, tell me if I'm right. If I boil it down, basically what you're giving me is a series of lenses. First of all, here's what you see with SKAN. Let's talk iOS for a second. Here's what you see with SKAN. Here's what the partner is claiming. And here's what we think is actual. And so you're showing me what reality looks like through a bunch of different lenses, including all the different data points that are available. What Singular has determined based on all the data, this is most likely true. But you can dive into all the data sets from partners and from different perspectives and views. Is that correct?
Yes, you've summarized it perfectly. I think it's really, like if you're just a starter, you might try to just start from one data set to see your results and kind of scale from there. But we know that as you get bigger and bigger and your scale is larger and the answers kind of matter a lot, like at the higher scales, then you might want to kind of increase the sophistication, try to measure these in better ways. I can give you an example, right? Just to try to prove that point is throughout like the advanced integrations kind of rollouts and implementation, we saw that for like the scaled customers, sometimes they would see those differences and suddenly the advanced integrations would show lower numbers, for example, compared to SKAN. And you would actually imagine that's okay for attributing both deterministically and probabilistically. You should see all the attributions coming there. But they saw like a 50% difference, like that SKAN installs were higher than actually what we're getting in the advanced integration. And once we kind of dived into the numbers with one of the beta customers, we actually saw that the advanced integrations on the network side weren't covering one of the bigger placement types, one of the bigger publishers as part of their inventory. So the ability to detect this problem and then kind of troubleshoot it together with the network and solve it and really increase the number of attributions was possible because of the comparison with SKAN as kind of like an audit and kind of finding out the gap there. So I think that was like a great example of showing the value.
Interesting. Debugging attribution because you have different views based on different technologies.
Exactly.
Love it. Love it. Wow. Which is also kind of a good segue because as you've talked about, okay, you're just starting out. Hey, you're using one partner, 3 partners, whatever. You're throwing a couple grand a month, 5K, maybe 10K a month, whatever. And you're saying, okay, give me that unified measurement, one number. I'll go with that. I trust you guys. Hey, it's pretty good. Good. No problem. Go for it. Excellent. Now you get to the big boys and they're spending tens of millions of dollars a month and they want to know in detail and they want to debug all the stuff like you just talked about. One of the people that I recently talked to on Growth Masterminds was Jonathan Reich, who's the CEO of Zedge. They have over 750 million cumulative app installs. Pretty cool stuff. And he talked about doing incrementality testing. One of the reasons was because one of the particularly challenging problems for marketers who are marketing on iOS is on the App Store, on Apple search ads. If I rank well, do I also buy my own keywords? Do I let a competitor get in there? Am I just double paying because I did all the ASO work and I've done all this other work and now I'm paying for something I would have got anyways when somebody searched? Really, really hard to know. Is that an incremental investment? And so basically what they did is they started doing incrementality tests with or without, pick a market and do it, don't do it. And they found super interesting things. They understood what to do, what not to do, where the spend was incremental, where it wasn't. Is that one of the technologies? And are there some other technologies that if you're super advanced and spending tons of money, you should add to what we've already talked about?
Yes, for sure. And definitely like incrementality measurement is a hot topic and it has different methodologies as well, like various methodologies to try to test kind of your assumptions and measure that incremental value. And like you said, like as you grow, definitely something that we would recommend, like including in your measurement strategy. And there are multiple approaches there. One that Zedge has been running very effectively is that the geolift type of studies, right? Like the idea of, okay, let's pause or double the spend like a specific category, a specific region, DMA or whatever for a specific partner and see how that impacts kind of the overall values there. There are also the other approaches, such as doing like A/B tests, for example, like trying to show your ads for like only a specific segment of users and seeing kind of the lift in the actual affected users versus the control group that didn't see the ad. There's also the whole kind of area of like media mix modeling, basically, here, like trying to put like all the spend and all the results, total results over time in kind of standard like regression models or Bayesian models to see kind of the correlation these over time and see if they make sense. All of these are valid approaches with pros and cons. But definitely as a strategy, I would say it provides a lot of deep insights into kind of your results, and something I would recommend utilizing as kind of use scale. Again, probably those are pretty advanced, or probably when you start, you usually just want to like get the bottom line results and move on. But as you scale more and you have more partners and higher budgets, then definitely it's a very effective and important tool in the belt.
So it's kind of interesting as we bring this podcast to a close, because one of the reasons that I wanted to do this with you is I think many marketers in the space look at all these things, all these measurement technologies, all these ad network technologies and programs, and I kind of go like, it's getting insane. It's getting very complicated. It's getting very challenging. But how I feel right now, and you tell me if it's false or if it's justified, I feel pretty good because there's complexity. And you can choose how much of that complexity you want to dive into or not dive into. But the future of measurement is looking pretty positive. And that's pretty cool, given how bleak and how dark it looked at certain points in the last couple of years. Am I on drugs, or am I accurate here?
No, I completely agree with you. And I'm usually more also on the optimistic side, but we also see it based on the data. Like with all these advancements, we see that the data makes more sense now compared to the last 2 years, and things are getting easier for marketers to digest when they try to measure their campaigns. So yes, like behind the scenes, there's like more moving parts and more questions to ask and validate. But at least at the bottom line, when you're trying to start a campaign, you want to check the results, I think the end user experience for the marketer and the advertiser are getting better for sure. Like before, it was a lot of, I guess, different views with partial information in each. Now I think those views are getting closer to each other in a way. So yes, there is nuances and cases in which they don't match, but now it becomes actually easier and better to cross-reference these. So I think it's definitely good news. We also see it in the data that it's getting better and better over time, and it makes me very bullish about like how marketers would be able to see better the results and optimize the results over time for sure.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for this time.
Of course, yeah. Happy to join again for more of these sessions.